what we're doing here is we're exploring one creative question. And I'm here with our normal host, Noah. Say hi, Noah.
Hello there. I am definitely not normal.
Noah and I will be exploring the question, if you could add one character from one horror film to another, which would you choose and how would it improve the film? So my answer to this question is I'm going to take the film that ranked the lowest on our roundtable discussions. This is the film that we hated the most, and I am going to add a character, the main character from a film we haven't yet talked about, but perhaps will on another podcast. So the film we talked at, the lowest rated film on our roundtable discussions every Sundays is Martyrs. We found this film to be just awful, banal. It did not have, it had some really anti-feminist messages in it, many of us felt, and it also had a conclusion that we found to be absolutely ridiculous and stupid and ultimately unsatisfying. So I'm going to spoil Martyrs in my answer to this question. And the character that I am going to add to Martyrs is the main character. Her name is Jen from the French film Revenge. This is a pulpy 2017-18 film. It's another French horror film, and it's basically a story about a woman who is wronged, and there are some people who need to get got, and boy, they get got by the end of this in a blood-soaked revenge movie. Now, the way I'm going to do this is, if you've seen Martyrs, you know the setup. They basically torture women to death. It's a cult that essentially tortures women to death because when women die, they die pretty, and that means that they might have some idea as to what happens in the great beyond. Fine. So I'm going to add the Jen to Martyrs. And so after the main action of this film, and once we start to get the reveal, that's when I'm going to have Jen enter the film, and she's going to do some revenge on this cult. She's going to prevent the original person, the first person is going to die and get buried, as happens in Martyrs. But the second person, right before she gets, skinned alive, Jen is going to come in, and she's going to get a lot of the all of the people who are responsible for this stupid cult. And so that is my new mashup of Revenge and Martyrs, and I think it's a way different, way more interesting, a way more feminist film, and it's a film that essentially works as a meta commentary on Martyrs. We felt that film's ultimate conclusions were completely unsatisfying, and Jen works as one of us to say, yes, these are unsatisfying, which is why I'm murdering all of you cult members. And so that is my pitch for Martyrs / Revenge. What do you think, Noah? How would you? What do you think of this pitch?
That is a good choice. I will tell you what, it is definitely reverse, right? So it's like Martyrs was women hunting and Revenge is man hunting, right? Like There's a scene in Revenge that I've never forgotten. I think it's the initial part where they like push her off a cliff, Jen, and she lands on that tree. Almost, I think she gets impaled by it actually. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, like dying pretty in Martyrs. Talk about the opposite. I mean, that was gruesome and brutal, and she has no fucks to give when she comes back and blows everybody's head off. Mm-hmm. That's she would be a good candidate. I can see that. She doesn't take shit lying down.
I'm adding her to like the beginning of the third act of Martyrs. I also toyed with the idea of adding her to the very end of Martyrs. So instead of that lady committing suicide at the end of Martyrs, it's Jen behind her with a shotgun and just blowing her head off and then going down and blowing the rest of the cult away. Like just adding Jen as sort of a coda to Martyrs. But I think that incorporating her into the action of the film gives us a little more satisfying, blood-drenched, pulpy French horror shit.
So I'm thinking of the beginning of Martyrs, who has a woman come in with the shotgun and blow the hell away of that family. So if we put Jen in that boat later on, feels very similar. So I like this. And I think even in Revenge, there's quite a few scenes with Jen with a shotgun, which is what they could have called the movie. They could have just called it Jen with a shotgun, and I would have been happy too.
I would have been happy as well.
Revenge is pretty straightforward also. Instead of hobo with a shotgun, Jen with a shotgun. Just pitching it out there, guys. That's a great choice. I like this. And it makes sense. I think ultimately that would be that would be interesting. Well, hey, Martyrs the sequel. Jen's Revenge.
Jen's Revenge. Yeah. I like it. Little matchup. It's a lot better than Jason versus whatever the fuck.
Yeah. Oh, that kills Freddy versus Jason. Shit. I like this.
What about you? What's your answer to this question?
All right. Well, I want to warn you that my answer is a little tongue-in-cheek. However, there is a great deal of logic to my pitch. So I don't diss it right away. I want to argue for it here, okay? I think initially people are going to think it's sort of weird, but I'm going to convince you by the end of this. So I would take Colonel Ives, who also goes by Calhoun, in the 1999 cannibal horror film Ravenous, and put him into the 2017 French cannibal horror film Raw. And here's why I would do this. Raw is primarily a film about self-discovery and becoming, right? So the main character, Justine, is learning that she has a desire to consume human flesh. She's an adolescent coming into adulthood. She's ripe for mentoring, right? And her parents are kind of out of the picture in the movie, even though they both know she's going to become a cannibal. Like, they're letting her go through all of this on her own, which is kind of messed up, right? So Justine has a guidance problem. She needs direction. And on the flip side, Colonel Ives from Ravenous is like one of the most, if not the most self-actualized cannibal ever put to cinema. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I love how this is a category.
He totally is, though, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Right, like he knows himself very well in light of his desires, right? He knows what being a cannibal is all about. He knows who he is. He's just fully developed. He's a self-actualized and introspective cannibal. They exist, people. So in Ravenous, we see him in philosophical discussions with other characters about the morality of cannibalism, society, and essentially like being a kind of apex predator with regard to humanity. So this is a character who's thought about a lot about what it means to be a flesh eater. So in my world, I think I would take Colonel Ives, give him the longevity or virility, if you will, from hundreds of years of eating human flesh. Like perhaps he gets tired of living in the US, maybe the authorities are after him or something. So he moves to France, right? And like, what could be more inconspicuous than being a guidance counselor at a veterinary school, right? Like, right? I mean, come on here. Like,
this is great. I love how you've solved, like, you told me your pitch, which in fairness to our viewers, he didn't know my pitch, but I knew his. And my first question was going to be, how are you going to solve the timeline problem? And you solved it because not only is he a cannibal, he's also an immortal who then goes to school to become a French guidance counselor at a veterinary school.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
It makes certainly sense. Does.
Yeah. So let's envision this. So suddenly Justine makes her way into his office after the plethora of social issues that she's going through with her classmates, right? So let's say Ives notices her physical symptoms, and because because he's been a cannibal for so long, he understands that like her symptoms are sort of the first phase of being a new cannibal, right? It's like cannibal adolescence, if you will. So like she has all the telltale signs of like early Wendigo transformation. So, and side note here, all right, like there would be a discrepancy here between the films, right? So in Ravenous, when you eat the flesh of another, there's no like itching or hives or, you know what I mean? Like the stuff that goes on.
Their strength, in fact.
Exactly. So there's no the terrible initial symptoms we see in Raw. So, but we can get around this. We can get around this by saying, hey, she's European. She's European, right? Like maybe the scientific physiological aspects of the Wendigo effect appear differently on a person over here in the US than they do if you're born in France. Different diets, different customs. Maybe it affects people differently in that way. Maybe it affects the sexes differently. After all, in Ravenous, we only see cannibal men.
Maybe it's also you could add to the mythology that the meat has to be prepared in a certain way, or you could change it that she has hives is because she lived her entire life as a vegan up until that point. And so as a result, it's the first exposure to meat that causes these things. I think this is an interesting way to sort of add to the mythology of these two universes.
Totally. I think you can solve that discrepancy. And although there is the differences between the movies, both movies share in the idea that once you taste flesh, you become consumed by the desire to have more of it, right? Like that's true in Ravenous, and it's also true in Raw. Look at Justine's sister in Raw, right? Like she's a cannibal. She knocks cars off the road to get some of that sweet brain juice every now and again, right? Like, Justine looks at her roommate like a piece of meat, like about halfway through the movie. There's similarities in the way that cannibalism is all consuming. So maybe it was like some intense philosophical conversation she had with guidance counselor Ives about being who you truly are, about overcoming modern conceptions of morality. Maybe that becomes the push that Justine needs to find out who she really is and to accept it, to self-actualize. Now, you could make the argument that this would be a much less organic and to some extent a haphazard or ad hoc narrative device, right? And I think there's some merit there. Like you could make the argument that Raw is a better movie with organic self-discovery, with like Justine having no help, right? But her sister, though, in the movie, like, how do I want to phrase this? Her sister already kind of serves as the same sort of plot device in the way I'm describing Colonel Ives. Like her sister eventually lets her in onto the fact that she's a cannibal too. She guides her through the politics of veterinary school. So there already is a kind of guidance character built into Raw. I would simply swap Justine's sister for Colonel Ives. I would write Raw without Justine having a sister, and in place of that, inject Colonel Ives as part of the mechanism for Justine's growth and self-actualization. And that is how I would make Raw a better horror film. Introduce a character who already has all the things Justine is looking for as a mechanism for guiding her into this process of self-awareness and becoming, right? And there's no better cannibal candidate for this than the legendary Robert Carlyle as Colonel Ives from Ravenous. That's my pitch.
I think that's a really good pitch. And I also like the idea of I don't want to totally get rid of the sister character, though. I wonder if there's a way that you could adjust the sister character so that she just doesn't give Justine the support that she needs, and it's in fact this older cannibal who's able to give her the support that she, because I think that sister is a really interesting character within the context of that film.
Yeah, her sister would be like, "Hey, have you seen that hot guidance counselor?"
Right. I mean, you
checked
can
him
get
out.
rid of the scene where like they chop off the sister's finger and then she starts going to town on the sister's finger. You can't. I don't want to lose that scene. That's basically why I want that sister to stay around. But yeah, I really like this. I really like your pitch, Noah. And I guess my question, the last question that I would have for you, is thematically. Do you think you've addressed this slightly in your pitch, but I'd like to kind of delve a little bit deeper into this. Thematically, you talked about how Raw is about self-discovery and about discovering oneself, and you think that Ives would provide that that avenue for that. But what about some of the themes from Ravenous, the existential themes that we see in Ravenous? Do you think that there'll be any crossover so that Ravenous's themes might have something to say and is something to add to Raw?
Well, I think so. The fact that Raw takes place in a veterinary school would be interesting, right? There's some conversations in Raw about the ethics of animal eating, and I think even rape. There's conversations about rape, and there's a sense in which when we look at Ravenous and Manifest Destiny, there's a sense in which a lot of the film is like the I don't want to say the rape of the natural world. That makes me sound too Jurassic Parkish, but like the rape of other societies, sort of the destruction of them in light of some of the early U.S. political stuff, right? So there is this sort of like, it's all about us. We're going to take over. We win as humans. There's that sort of thing going on, I think, in Ravenous that we could pull over into a conversation about animal abuse, about eating animals, about just our place as humans in the natural world, how we treat each other and how we treat animals, and maybe some of the differences between those two. I mean, in Ravenous, really some of the conversation is this guy an animal himself? He almost the movie's called Ravenous. It's not called Like a Sir, It's called Ravenous, right? Like I think that I think that connotes images of eating and destruction and yeah, being feral. That's a good way to put it. And I think that's the into having conversations about animals and eating them and fixing them too. I mean, this is at a veterinary school, so I think of the conversations that could be had there. Perhaps he's very disillusioned and cynical about helping animals, right? Because they're weak. There's so many ways those conversations could go. There's so many interesting philosophical avenues that we could take that. So
that's really good. All right. So what do you think? Let us know in the comments below. We also have a poll. You can see it by clicking up here or up here. I can never get the location of the card right. And you can choose which one you prefer. Noah's Ravenous plus Raw or my Martyrs plus Revenge answers, and let us know in the comments below if you have any other creative questions that you want all of us to explore here on the Deadly Analysis podcast. And be sure to join us every Sunday for a discussion of some of the best horror films, and on Wednesdays for our 2-minute reviews. Thank you for watching.